Hi, I'm Louisa Smith, the buying director of Book Passage, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our event for Basil's War, a classic espionage thriller from Pulitzer Prize winning critic, essayist, and best-selling novelist Stephen Hunter. Action-packed and bursting with World War II era intrigue, this book is a fantastic escape into the world of swashbuckling spies, secret codes, and clever counterintelligence agents. Stephen has been called one of the best thriller writers around, and we heartily agree. Stephen Hunter is the author of several best-selling novels, including Time to Hunt, Black Light, Point of Impact, and the New York Times bestsellers Havana, Pale Horse Coming, and Hot Springs. Stephen won the 2003 Pulitzer Prize for Criticism, as well as the 1998 American Society of Newspaper Editors Award for Distinguished Writing in Criticism for his work as a film critic at the Washington Post. In conversation with Stephen tonight is someone who knows firsthand what it takes to write a heart-stopping thriller, Douglas Preston. Douglas has published 36 books of both nonfiction and fiction, of which 29 have been New York Times bestsellers. He's the co-author with Lincoln Child of the Pendergast series of thrillers. He writes about archaeology and anthropology for the New Yorker magazine, and he works as an editor at the American Museum of Natural History in New York and taught nonfiction writing at Princeton University. Douglas currently serves as president of the Authors Guild, the nation's oldest and largest association of authors and journalists, and he's a great supporter of independent bookstores. Before we begin, I want to thank every one of you who is watching for joining us today. We know you have many choices of events, both virtual and in person these days, so we really thank you for spending your time with us for another special author event. If at any time you have questions for Stephen or Douglas, please go ahead and enter them in the chat. We will also be posting the link for Basil's War in the chat for anyone interested in learning more about the book or supporting Book Passage by making a purchase. And with no further ado, I would love to turn things over to our two wonderful guests. Welcome to you both. We're absolutely thrilled you could be here for what is sure to be a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so.
Thank you, Louisa. Well, I'm very happy to be here because Stephen is one of my favorite writers, and I really love this book. This is a fantastic book. It is, James Joyce once said that that tragedy is underdeveloped comedy. And I love this book because of the wit and the adventure, the puzzles within puzzles of it. It's really a wonderful read. So I'm very happy to be here. I've got a lot of questions for Stephen. And the first one really has to do with the new character in this book, Basil St. Florian. Now, my first question is, am I pronouncing that name right? I mean, it's a British name. Is that correct?
You know what? Any way you care to pronounce it is okay with me. I'm not one of those possessive people who says, oh no, you have to do it this certain way or that certain way. And the truth is, that's a way of covering up the fact that I'm not even sure how it's not pronounced myself. Basil or Basil, I don't know. Take your pick, and that's where we'll go.
Well, even the last name, I know that the English name St. John in England is pronounced St. John. So I wonder if this was St. Florian or St. Florian. But anyway,
I will tell you that I looked into the name after it was too late to change it and found out that St. Florian is the patron saint of firemen. And, I wish I could say that's such a clever touch. That was something subtextual that I invented and that I came up with, but it was sheer coincidence. Luck.
Well, it's brilliant. I mean, it's such an absolutely British name too. And what a fabulous character. I just loved him. And I really would love to hear, as a novelist myself, how you invented him. Was he a real person or based on a real person or a combination? I mean, he's such a vivid, charming, amusing, and roguish character. Anyway, I'd love to hear how he sprung out of your head.
Well, comes from my university education at the University of MGM. I was a movie kid, and I watched movies as I ended up a professional film critic for about 20 years. I loved movies. I particularly loved, and I just absorbed movies. I consumed them. They sunk deep into my subconscious, and I love there was a figure from the movies. There are many archetypal figures in movies. John Wayne would be one, Clint Eastwood would be another. But there was a very cool blade of an English wit and adventurer. George Sanders played him, James Mason played him. I suppose you could argue that Sean Connery and the other boys played him, but I was enormously taken with him, and I loved his voice. I loved the deep, sonorous baritone. I love the dry, crisp wit. And the truth is, I think the way we start is it's not so much that I liked him, it was that I wanted to be him. And there was no way I could get there from here. But as a writer, I found that voice, and I found that I really enjoyed writing in that voice. And whether or not I have any particular great talent for it or not, I don't know what to say. But I found that the process in that voice was so pleasant and felt so natural that I just let the voice sort of take over. And in a certain, you'll be familiar with this, certain bizarre sense, the character takes over the plot and all the machinery, and you become the recording secretary. And that's pretty much what happened in this case.
Yeah, that happens with a really powerful character. He strides on stage and he just won't cooperate. But
Yeah.
but it was, I mean, he really is. I mean, you mentioned Sean Connery. He's a bit like Sean Connery playing James Bond or George Mason, but they're you peel back the layer on him and there's more underneath too. He's a little more complex than the James Bond character, I think.
Thank you very, very much for that. I mean, to me, this one thing the movies never go into at any depth is the psychology of the characters. But when you're doing what we do, you've got to make the motives clear, and you've got to show the pool from which the motive sprung. And he can't just be a certain way. He's heroic because he's heroic. That's what is in the movies. The handsomest guy is always the most heroic guy. But I have, as a novelist, as novelists, we've got deeper responsibilities, and we've tried to we've got to come up with a coherent backstory and sort of sense of motivation in character, a theory of character for the guy, and set limits within which he can operate and limits from which he cannot operate. You compare him to James Bond. He's by no means as brutal as James Bond. He's not a physical guy. He's not a puncher. He never gets in fights or car chases. His thing is that sort of unflappable calmness and clearness of mind to know what to do. And it's usually not killing someone. It's usually outmaneuvering someone and setting something up. For a Steve Hunter book, this absolutely sets the record for the lowest number of dead bodies at the end. I'm a mass murderer as a novelist. I usually don't get out shy of 25 at the least, sometimes a lot more than that. But in this one, as I recall, there's only one, death in the narrative, and I think most people will agree that it's richly deserved and elegantly delivered. And but I mean, I don't see him as a man of violence so much as a man of intelligence.
He is. He's
much smarter than I am, by the way.
He's got finesse as opposed to brute force. But I was looking through some of the things you've written about how you create characters, and there was one thing that struck me. You talked about the living line versus the dead line in character creation. And many novels you read, the characters have that deadline. It's just, I mean, they might have all kinds of details about the character. You might know everything about that character, and yet somehow that character is got the dead line around him. And yours have the living line. So talk about that a little bit, how you do that.
I would have to say that it's a very good question, by the way. I don't want to sound trite and say, oh, gee, it's a Vulcan mind meld. But let me just quote Kurt Vonnegut. He said it best. He said, when I write, I become what I seemingly must become. And I can't get any more specific than that. If you care about the character, I mean, first, there's two kinds of characters. There's expressive characters and there's administrative characters. You need the administrative characters, to answer the phone and issue the orders and climb the stairs and make the machinery of the book operate. But you need you've got a small group of expressive characters who you've got to make human in a variety of dimensions. And the only way you can do that is pretend very deeply to be them and try and become them. And I suppose it's like method acting. You've got to kind of understand their rhythms. You've got to understand what they can and can't do, understand their limits. You have to understand what they know about themselves and what they don't know about themselves. And it's just really, it's like you're groping. Some things feel authentic and some things don't. And I guess the art comes in cutting the inauthentic things and just leaving the authentic things. But I can't give writers tips on that, because I can't put it into more precise words. One thing I can say is it's always been helpful for me to try and work out a rhythm for their dialogue. One guy may talk in complete sentences. One guy may talk in 30-word sentences. One guy may talk in 4-word sentences. One guy may have gotten, 800 on his SAT verbals, and the other guy got 450, and their vocabularies should show that. So there should be some sort of mechanical grounding in what they're capable of that's important to you, because as one of the things I've also found is it's helpful to have limits. I'm not the kind of writer who could start with nothing, and I could never have written Dune, for example. I can't even read it, but I need signposts, I need fences, I need landscape, I need to see mountains in the distance, I need to know how he got from Winnetka out Northfield. I just, all those sort of limits that you place on him somehow, at least for me, make it more believable and let me get into him more, I hope, realistically. And I hope that, as I say, I hope to show him in a living line rather than a deadline. The deadline is tracing, and the living line is something spontaneous and filled with protoplasm. And of the two, the living line is the better, because people, even if they don't know the concept, they feel that which is real and that which is not. And so you're your subconscious is trying to get into their subconscious. If you could just get the conscious out of it, it would be so much easier.
Well, I hope that we have some aspiring authors listening to this, because what you just described from beginning to end is an absolutely perfect outline of how a novelist should approach character.
Yes, thank you very much.
I really agree with it. I mean, it's really true that, if you sit there, I mean, I've done this. You sit there, you list everything the character knows, where he went to school, what music he listens to, all this, how he dresses, and you still have a corpse sitting, lying on your desk.
Yeah.
And to make that character come alive, follow the Steve Hunter rules that you just laid out.
Right.
That's I like that a lot.
Thank you, Doug.
But anyway, one of the things that interested me about this novel, and actually about all your novels, is the depth of historical research that goes into them. I mean, Basil's War, don't quite know how to pronounce that name yet. But anyway, this novel, you created this fabulous environment. I mean, Paris during the war, the atmosphere of that is amazing. Back in London, I mean, it's really extraordinary. And I just wonder how important your journalism background was in writing this kind of material. I mean, you obviously aren't making it up. This is beautifully researched. And
Flaubert, whom I've never read, and I won't pretend like I have, he did say God is in the details. But that's actually not quite right. The truth is, God is in the right details. And you can put in too many accurate details, and then it's not fiction, it's a catalog. And so you have to have some imaginative ability to sift through and find the details that are, I guess, trite word for it would be resonant, that some have an extra buzz or meaning. And those are the details that will define the character, as opposed to, the color of his socks. And there are certain things that I'm very drawn to. I love clothes. I like guns, obviously. I like airplanes. I've seen a lot of movies where the lighting is the key to the scene. And so all that stuff fascinates me and interests me. And it's, as I said before, you want to, getting that stuff right also imposes limits on you. And the limits I find are helpful. And I also just take a sensual pleasure in getting it right. I was not a very good reporter because I didn't get a lot of stuff right. I was a pretty good film critic, but I wasn't too good as a reporter. And but as a novelist, I love the reporting aspect of it, and I do love getting it right. I have to boast that in my working on a novel now, which is set in World War II also. In fact, Basil also appears in it. And I go to so much trouble that I find out the designation, the designation for the overall, I'm sorry, for the U.S. Army combat suspenders in World War II. And I guarantee you, how many other books you've read about World War II, you've never read a book in which the combat suspenders are correctly designated. And for me, that's cool. Maybe other people will, oh, hey, he got the suspenders right. Or people will say, what do I need to know that for? But for me, it was not easy, but it was a very satisfying find to get that utterly, I guess, meaningless detail, maybe meaningless to everyone else, but to me, it's very pleasing to deploy it.
Well, I think, this is something I believe as a novelist, is that even if the readers know nothing about it, they know that you're not bullshitting them. They know that that's true. They know you've done your research. When you talk about combat suspenders, which is crazy, I'd never heard of that. But I know that, as a reader, here's an author who really knows what he's talking about, even if I don't. So.
I think that's very, very true. And sometimes you'll see things. Well, I'll give you an example. In the same book I'm working on now, there's an issue of tape. And it turns out that the kind of tape that was used in World War II was called duct tape, D-U-C-K. However, in 1965, they started calling it duct tape, D-U-C-T. So I'm very carefully, whenever I use it, I call it duct tape, and I see endless battles with copy readers for the rest of my life, and casual readers calling me up and saying, or sending me emails or marking up the manuscript saying, no, it's duct tape. No, it's duct tape, damn it, D-U-C-K. And I want on my tombstone a hard thought. Stephen Hunter, he knew what duct tape was. That would be enough for me.
That's hilarious. You should mention that because I've got an advanced reading copy of this, which is, not the final version. And I saw that duct tape and I thought, oh, well, I don't need to mention that error to anybody because I'm sure that there are excellent proofreaders at Steve's publisher and at Mysterious Press. And they'll correct that in the final version. But now I know it doesn't need to be corrected.
Well,
and now I've got this little factoid that
I hope they didn't correct it behind my back.
I love that. That's good. Oh, that's very good. Well, another thing that I really am interested in personally are codes and also rare books. So the plot of this book, I don't want to give away too much, but this is not a spoiler. It involves a unique manuscript, which is the basis of a code. And it's a fascinating, I know that it's not original with you. This is actually a real code that has been used, but I wondered if you could explain how that works and how you came up with that crazy idea about this unique manuscript and so forth, because it's so clever. It's so clever. I wish I thought it up myself.
I do not consider myself clever. And in fact, I have always, one of my complaints about myself is I'm not clever enough. And it bothers me, I hope nobody notices. But in this case, the original assignment, which came from a very smart guy named Otto Penzler, was to write what he called a Biblio Mystery. And this was to be a novel about 100 pages long. And it had to turn on some aspect of books. And it had to turn on, lost books, found books, old books, new books, diaries lost. It just had to somehow be connected with the book world. And so, again, that was so helpful to me, having it framed very tightly. And if he had just said, just do anything for 100 pages, I would have failed. But when he said it had to be in that tight little world, that's how I got to thinking, and I came up with this idea of making it, I knew what a book code is. Everybody does spy novels knows what a book code is. But making it a replica of a medieval book code, and one of the other things that happened in this thing was that as I'm writing the first chapter to set it up. When I'm done with the first chapter, I'm at page 90 because the setup is so elaborate. And, setups, if you don't handle your setup, you destroy the book. The reader doesn't deserve it. It doesn't believe it. It doesn't work. If it's too boring. So I came up with the idea of integrating the narrative and the setup. And that gave me the freedom to make the setup more elaborate than it might normally have been. And I tried to make learning the setup, that is learning what the mission was about. We're seeing the mission in one chapter, then we go back to the setup, and then we set up mission. And I tried to play those two suspenseful narratives off against each other so that they both climax at the same time. So you would learn what the mission was exactly when you saw him do it, as saw him try and bring that off, the ultimate moment. And I don't know if anybody had ever done that before. And when I was done with it, I wasn't sure it worked. And for many years, I thought that the novella was like, when a python swallows a cow, okay, and there's this huge bulge. And I thought that's what this book is. It's a python with a cow inside it, because here's this riddle involving medieval texts, and it's just not it's not fully digested, and you just sort of see this big huge lump in the middle of the book. Then the same guy, Otto Penzler, had the idea of making it into a novel. And one of the things that I think happened was that the bulge went down as the snake got more longer and more complex. And I had to sort of work things through the bulge that related to, and this is way inside baseball. I apologize. I hear the computer monitors going off all over America. But at any rate, I think this version works much better because it doesn't have that sort of artifice, that sort of the awkward bulge in the middle, and that it's much more balanced in its perspective. But I'm so glad you thought it was clever, and everyone else seems to think it's clever. So I guess I can finally say at least once I was clever. Thank you so much, Doug.
Well, it was a very daring approach to the structure of the novel to go back and forth like that, and it really works. I was in awe of the virtuosity of it. It really came off very well. And I've written books involving rare books and stolen books, and the Book of Kells once, and so forth. And so I love the incorporation of this medieval manuscript with this code and everything else. Anyway, it was very good. So, well, let's see. All right, now here I'm going to move on to your Pulitzer Prize, because I never got one, and probably and certainly never will. And I'm curious to know, I've read quite a few of your movie reviews, and they are like, I am so glad I am not the director of a bad film that you reviewed, because they're some of the most amusing and outrageous and spot on reviews I've ever read. And this is what you won the Pulitzer Prize for, which I understand is very rare to go to a movie critic. Maybe you're the only one who's ever gotten it. But what I'm curious to know is, how did the Pulitzer affect your writing career, or did it at all? And how did it affect you? I mean, what is it like to win a prize like that?
Well, for me, it was extraordinary. It was a seemingly unobtainable goal. And I'd been what they call a finalist. The way they do it is they winnow it down to 3. And you usually don't win your first time as a finalist. Almost always you win after you've been a finalist. I was actually a finalist 2 years in a row. And someone said, it's harder to do that than to actually win the damn thing. So I was, but then it sort of fell away, and I didn't finish. I don't know how they can do this, but they assign a numerical order to it, 1, 2, 3, and on down. And I sort of seem to be dropping in the order. And it's a whimsical thing. It has to do with the judges. It has to do with the guy that's running the board. It has to do with the board. I won't deny that there's horse trading and deal making involved. I won't deny that certain papers have more influence than other papers. Everything bad you can say about the Pulitzers is probably true. And it can work against you, but it can also work for you. And I don't know in my specific case whether any of those extra journalistic things were in play, but I felt that I had clearly demonstrated, by my presence at the top of the list for many years, my worthiness to be up there. And when I won, it was as if, what's the line? Maybe I got this from Richard Condon. It was as if an angel had poked an umbrella hole into the floor of heaven, and bliss had cascaded down. And that's what it felt like. I mean, I had a moment of such pure, absurd vanity, narcissistic joy that I can't recall it. As for what influence it did, it's had on me, you know, I can't deny that it's probably had some. I also, I'm always listed, and it's a marketplace it's really hard to get noticed in because the marketplace is so good. So anything singular is important. And say by Pulitzer Prize winner Stephen Hunter on the jacket of the books has probably helped a great deal. Now, some people have said, and there's some legitimacy to this, Steve, you want it for criticism, but they're using it to sell novels. Is that quite fair? And my answer to that is, it's probably not. In fact, I'm going to write a very angry letter tomorrow, or maybe next week, or I'm not sure. I'll write it sometime. You're just, as you know, it's a terrible market. Maybe you're lucky, maybe you're not. Every little bit helps. So I have accepted it, and no one can document whether it has or has not helped. No one can document whether or not it's kept me in the publishable realm or not. I don't, you look at that and you just don't know how these things play out. Maybe an algorithm, if I ever figured out what one was, but maybe an algorithm could tell me, which factors did what. It seems to have helped. It makes me happy. It didn't really change my life very much. I do like, I like it. I never tell people that I won the Pulitzer Prize, but I do like it if people know that I've won the Pulitzer Prize. That's the mark of the truly insane egoist, that little game. And I have been known to sometimes say to people, make sure, blah, blah, blah. So I'll be that scurrilous about it. But I will say it's certainly in every respect made life better. And I'll tell you one other thing. I have a plot. I'm going to use the actual prize itself is a block of translucent plastic or glass. It's like early Steubenville glass, before they got to the bears fighting the eagles. It's just letters. And I may make a video regarding the thing. And I'm in my own mind, I'm not sure, is the thing the prize? I don't think so. I think the prize is just a conceit. It's a concept. It's a realization. The thing just symbolizes it. So I've got an idea for a funny little video using the chunk of glass that I may shamelessly exploit for the next time I'm out with a book. A book without Basil, I must say. Basil was my gimmick this time.
Well, it sounds like it could go viral. You never know what's going to happen to it. You might find yourself pilloried and mocked, or who knows, once you release something like that online. But as far as promoting books go, my God, anything goes. I when I was struggling as an author and not able to get any traction, I thought, maybe I should go out and murder somebody or take a shot at a politician.
Yeah.
No, I'll finally get in the New York Times that way,
Yeah, I know.
I'll be on the front page.
Yeah, that's it's tough. You mentioned I have a problem with the newspaper that you just mentioned, and that they, I would love to believe they're in a conspiracy against me, but I know, honestly, knowing how newspapers work, they just haven't noticed, and that's just the way it goes. So shut up about it. But cracking their little circle ain't easy, and maybe it'll happen yet, maybe it'll never happen. Doesn't really matter in the end, but they are a problem because they're the last big book review section in the world, including both the Sunday thing and the daily reviews. And, book reviews, I was a book review editor for 10 years, and book reviews have just gone away. They've vanished. There used to be every newspaper had a book review section and published 10 to 15 book reviews a week. Now only the Times does it. So they've got way too much power. It's not their fault. What are they supposed to do? But it is still a disturbing thing.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that because, none of my thrillers have been reviewed by the New York Times, but every nonfiction book I've written has been reviewed. And in fact, a serious novel I wrote, which didn't sell worth a damn, also got reviewed. And I just think that the Times review, I think they have a thing against thrillers.
Yeah.
I think that they just feel that they're not going to review them for whatever reasons they have. I mean, they review intellectual type thrillers and psychological thrillers, but when it comes to war thrillers or the kind of thrillers that I write with Lincoln, they're a little outre, they're a little maybe not. That's not their interest.
See, and that's the correct and adult attitude to have, and most of the time I have it. It is what it is. There's nothing to be done about it. Keep your mouth shut, do your work, try to present a happy face to the public on those few months of every couple of years when the public looks at your face, and shut up. But it is, it's not unnoticed. Yeah. It seems to be a thorn stuck in here. I wish I could get it, that sort of thing.
I mean, it'd be much better if they wrote a savage, damning review. Worst book ever published. It should be, I mean, at least you're noticed, even if it's a negative notice. But when they completely ignore you, you start to feel neglected, like a neglected, abandoned orphan child. Anyway, you're all right. So now there's something else I wanted to ask you about. This is not about Basil's War, but it's about Bob Lee Swagger, and I'm sure you knew you were going to have to talk about him because he's your main big kid.
Put my kids through college, so
yeah. I mean, he's really quite a character, and he's got the layers of complexity that every book you write peels it back a little bit more. But I'm curious to know, where he came from. How did you create him? He's a really curious, interesting character.
Well, here's in a nutshell. I could go on for hours about this, but even you would lose interest. And what he represents is something we talked about earlier: the difference between a dead line and a live line. He was originally based on an actual Marine sniper in Vietnam named Carlos Hathcock. And at the end of the first draft, the book did not work. And the reason it did not work because the main figure was drawn with a dead hand. He was a tracing. There's no spontaneity. There was no life. There was just a kind of a grim copy of the actual man. And in order to make that book work, I had to, at that point, force myself to forget Carlos Hathcock and try another approach to him. And I gave him some of my backstory. I probably made him more self-aware than a man like that would have been. I gave him a relationship with his father that in the end spawned a batch of other books. And once I let go from that sense of exact copying and let him bud and bloom and blossom as his own character, he got interesting and the book got interesting, and ultimately it got publishable. I mean, for a long time, I say this to any wannabe writers out there, you can write for years and it's not publishable. And then something happens, you have an insight or you have an epiphany, and it can go from dull to interesting to publishable very fast. So you've got to keep yourself open for that kind of thing, and you've got to let it happen. And don't hate yourself if you're laid into a non-career. You may still have a career. I consider myself a very late developer. Just keep at it, because somewhere down the line, and the, the magic can happen. The confluence of luck and talent and subject and interest, it can all come together. And when it comes together, it comes together fast. I mean, I went from an unpublishable novelist, or from a wannabe, to a novelist with a contract and a publishing date in about 2 weeks. That's how fast it changed for me. And that, I believe, can still happen.
Wow, I love that story. I was one of the questions at the very end here I was going to ask you is your advice for the aspiring writer, but do you have other tidbits of advice for the aspiring writer? Because you've already said a couple of things that, if were recorded and put into that master class that you see advertised everywhere, would be some of the most valuable advice I've heard about how to create character. But so give us some more of your writing tips. I'm curious to hear.
Well, I mean, see, with me, the drama was always labor. I am congenitally lazy. I have trouble getting out of bed. And that's even so when my next destination is the sofa. And when I wake up in the morning, that sofa seems like it's a long way away. But somehow you've got to make yourself do the damned work. And you will never account to anything. No one will ever judge your talent, will judge your heart, will judge your intelligence if you don't sit in the damn chair. So I've actually had a thought of writing a book. I probably dictated on writing novels. And the name of the book would be The Theory and Practice of the Chair. Because it all begins with the chair. Tolstoy wouldn't be Tolstoy if he hadn't come to terms with the chair, nor Dostoevsky, nor Mickey Spillane. Now, maybe some guys that comes naturally. It didn't to me. And I had to fake myself into doing the work. I had to swindle myself into doing the work. And that's where it begins. And, I all the time at book signings, back when we had them, and book shows, and that people will ask me what the secret is. There is no secret. And they'll always say, or here's what I hear a lot: I have a great idea for a book, but darn it, Sally has me doing all these chores on Saturday, so I never get to it. And I think to myself, you're the Walking Dead. I would never say that because I'm too polite, but that guy is doomed. He'll never publish, because if you can't get into the damn chair, it's just a fantasy. It's just like, it's like you got to take infield practice if you want to be a baseball player. You have to throw the ball or hit the ball if you want to be a golfer. You just have got to do the work, and you have to find ways to trick yourself into doing the work. And I have some ways to do that. I don't want to go into them now; they're too complicated. But I just the most thing I can say is, I've said the two most important words in any book are the and end. Now, I never actually, no one writes a the and an end at the end, although I sometimes do, just to be perverse. But if you can't write those two words, there's no mercy for you, because you're competing against people who can write those two words. And you can't make a pitch based on a fantasy. You've got to be able to show pages. You've got to be able to show outline. You've got to be able to sort of show you're willing to work in that industry. Or, and it's different now, you can always go the do-it-yourself route, and that's now possible. And it's not as condemnatory as it used to be. You know, look at Vince Flynn. He published his first few books himself, but because they did so well, he attracted Mandarin attention, and he ended up, I can't remember where, but he ended up, I think, at Doubleday or Bantam or someplace like that. And he did very, very, very well.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, your story about the chair. I have a friend, I probably shouldn't name him, but he's a very famous author. And he told me once that he ties himself into his chair to keep himself from getting up. He said, you know, I'm sitting in my chair trying to write, and I'm looking over here and I see that the doorknob needs polishing. I've got to polish that doorknob. So I get up and polish the doorknob. And then he said, so to stop myself from doing that, I tie myself in the chair. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, what's to keep you from untying yourself in the chair? That's the dumbest thing. You could just, he said, well, you should see the knots I make. I mean,
Right.
you know, he said,
That story is if I knew of it. He told it to me.
so much trouble to untie myself that I just sit there and work. And anyway, but I think your novel, your book that you write on writing should be called, you know, Sitting in the Damn Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, Doug.
But interesting. Well, you know, getting back to Swagger, I'm kind of interested in the idea that, you know, after you created this one character, you then added his father to your writing universe, and you added a long lost son, Ray Cruz. And I was reading, I can't remember what I was reading about you, but at one point you said to an interviewer, the bastards wouldn't go away.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't.
I mean, what was the process that led you to expand the Swagger clan and bring in new characters related to each other and even give them their own books?
Well, it's so odd. If you had said to me you're going to end up writing all these books about an alpha male family in West Arkansas, if you said that to me 30 years ago, I would have laughed at you. I mean, nothing could be further than my mind. But each book left me with questions. The only way to answer those questions was to write another book. And then questions, book. Sort of, it's always been a dialogue between parts of my mind, my conscious and my subconscious. And maybe my subconscious knows a lot, has had this all figured out, but my conscious knows nothing. And the only way I can access the answers in the subconscious is to write the damn book. And I've been amazed. Sometimes I will see connections in the whole saga that are so I couldn't have planned. I'm not smart enough to have put that there so that 6 books down the road I can pick it up. I hear that. How did you know that such and such was going to happen then, and you could write a book about it now? And the answer is, I don't know. You know, it's just part of the miracle of imagination and my fervent belief. That hello, are we still here?
You're still there.
Okay. Anyway, I believe, you know, it's the subconscious knows all. And one of the things you're doing as a writer is interrogating your own subconscious. Somehow I've lost video here. Is this, are we in trouble?
You're actually quite clear.
Can you all see me?
Yeah, everyone, you're still good.
Okay, all right.
I guess everyone can still see you. I can see you anyway, but yeah, that I like what you just said, interrogating your subconscious. And you know, you said something much earlier in this conversation. I just want to bring up again. You said it's that you wanted to be that character rather than just create a new character. You actually felt you wanted to kind of be him. And, I've found the same thing in writing my characters, that the best ones are the ones that I want to be. I won't be because I don't have those skills. I'm not that smart or that intrepid, but somehow there's a fantasy element to writing. You want to write about somebody and lives and settings and backgrounds you sort of fantasize about. You wish you could be there. Paris during the war. What a time to be in Paris. Not maybe necessarily a good time, but a very interesting time.
Well, I don't know really what the answer is, because I just, there's a certain point where you talk about this stuff and you run out of words, just because you don't know that much about it yourself. I think I know. It's like you ask someone, how were you a success? And he says, well, first I did this, and then I saw that opportunity, so I took it, and that led to this opportunity over here, and I did that. That may be utter crap. That he may have no idea. What was really going on was that A, there was luck, B, there was changes in the culture that made something possible that he had nothing to do with. C, there was changes in the workplace or in the whatever the immediate circumstances were that he had he had nothing to do with, that he benefited from. And so a lot of this stuff, again, unless you get a truth algorithm somewhere down the line, a lot of this stuff is just unknowable. There's no empirics onto it. And it's my ability, the only thing in the end you're left with is you try and pull not detail so much, but feelings out of your own life and try and capture the emotional reality of those feelings in the prose that you crank out. And it's an imprecise process. And sometimes what it produces is ghastly, and other times it works. And I don't know, just as an athlete doesn't know why he goes 4 for 4 in one game and 0 for 4 in the next game. You just don't really know. It's too complicated to ever know. Is that
These are all good, because your answers are not formulaic. And I think one of the things that aspiring writers want is sort of a formulaic answer. And there are no answers like that. And I think what you're saying it really matches what I feel too about writing, is that it's kind of an ineffable process. It's not really easy to explain. I've taught writing for a long time, and I still despair at explaining what's really going on inside my head. And I can see that you struggle with that too, because there's all kinds of subconscious and semi-conscious processes going on that enrich the actual intellectual act of writing.
Yeah. Well, I admire, one of the things I admire so much about you is that you've had a parallel career in nonfiction. And I do, in fact, enjoy writing nonfiction. I wrote a account of an assassination attempt on Harry Truman many years ago. And if something came up like it, I wouldn't mind another crack at it. It is a very good discipline to have.
Yeah, I find that writing nonfiction greatly enriches my fiction. And I think you being a journalist, a lot of the best writers that we have been journalists. Mark Twain, Hemingway, you just go on and on. They started as journalists. And I think there's something about being a daily journalist, having to crank that work out, but also having to get to the heart of a matter quickly and succinctly.
If something came up like it, I wouldn't mind another crack at it. It is a very good discipline to have.
I find that writing nonfiction greatly enriches my fiction. And I think you being a journalist,
a lot of the best writers that we have been journalists. I mean, Mark Twain, Hemingway. I mean, you just go on and on. They started as journalists.
Yes, they did.
And I think there's something about being a daily journalist, having to crank that work out, but also having to get to the heart of a matter quickly.
You
and
can't say
succinctly.
I wouldn't mind another crack at it.
I think we have a ghost in the machine here.
Does someone have the YouTube video up?
Yeah, I find that writing nonfiction great.
Oh my goodness, somebody has it up.
And I think you
Exploding on me.
journalism.
Help.
A lot of the best writers have been journalists. I mean, Mark Twain.
Oh my God, I hate listening to my voice.
Whoever has the YouTube video up has to close it out.
Being a daily journalist, having to crank that work out, but also having to get to the heart of a matter quickly. And succinctly.
Steve, can I ask you to mute your computer really fast? Just
There we go.
Does someone have the YouTube video up?
I don't know.
Oh my goodness, somebody has it up.
Whoever has the YouTube video up has to close it out.
That's me. Okay.
I feel like we're in Groundhog Day here.
feels fitting for a little conversation between people that know all about how to surprise and us on the page. Here we go. Something we've never experienced before in an event, but we are very excited. This was incredible. I loved so many of the gems that you dropped in this tonight. I love what you said about God is in the right details. That's such a important thing when you're reading a book, that you're not getting bogged down in all the other stuff. I thought that was wonderful. I love the inside baseball things that you were talking about. And there were some wonderful questions from the audience. One about Terry Brown mentioned that the character of Basil reminds her of David Niven or Cary Grant. I like the idea of imagining somebody like that. Do either of you, when you start a character, do you visualize somebody already, or do they emerge as you're writing?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't think of any particular movie star. Well, I don't know who I thought of. I don't usually see faces. I hear voices. I see movement, but I don't really see faces. And when I describe one of my heroes' faces, it always comes out sort of generic. Okay, he's so tall, and I don't know. I can't. My mind doesn't work that way. It's a disappointing answer, I'm afraid, but
Yeah.
but that's. I don't see faces. I see minds. I see histories. I see things like hands and body carriage, but he had eyes of blue and a nose like a hawk, like a sword, and I can't. What does that mean? I have no idea what that means. When I type it, when I write it, I look at it, I say, "That's garbage. You can't do that."
What about you, Douglas? What about you? Do you imagine your characters, or they?
Well, it's odd, some characters I can see so clearly that they're actually more real to me than real people I know, like Pendergast, or Corey Swanson, for example, Nora Kelly. But then there are other characters who are a little vaguer. I don't really see their faces. It's kind of like what Stephen said. You kind of feel their personality, you feel their mind, you feel the way they think. But what color are their eyes? Well, I might be a little hard pressed to answer that question. Now, I write with a writing partner, Lincoln, on some novels.
Yeah.
And sometimes I realize he sees the character very vividly, as vividly as I do,
Oh,
except we are seeing them completely different characters. And then we have to
that's
sit down
interesting.
and have a big argument as to what that person really looks like. Does you know, is her hair black and straight, or is it a little farther down, or her eyes, you know, green or green blue? What, you know, and we've had some pretty nasty discussions over that because we both have such a fixed idea of what this character looks like.
I wonder though if it makes it sort of a richer character that you describe, because you have to justify each position you take on that when you're arguing with somebody, instead of just like a toss up of what you think. You know, you have to justify it.
Well, I'm curious. I wanted to ask Stephen a question. You know, when I write, I visualize what I'm writing about, and then I almost write what I see. And you're a movie critic and a movie fan. Is that how you do it? Do you sort of create the visual image of the setting and the characters in it?
In a sense, you're right. I was just thinking as we were discussing this, talked about faces. What I see is expressions, or maybe what I see is performance. I know the attitude and the tone and the posture. I see what the camera would see. I just don't do close-ups. And because the close-ups embarrass me. They're sort of, you know, I mean, some actors are lucky in that they have singular faces, and to see them is to know them for others. But that's a tough sell in prose. You know, I mean, I couldn't, you know, his eyes were alive with the blue of the sea, you know, I couldn't do
What imperishable prose.
stars, you know, I couldn't do that. So that's what I see. I do, you know, the influence of, well, see, here's a curious thing about me in the movies is that people always say to me, or people always assume that I learned my tricks from the movies. And maybe yes, maybe no, but to me, it feels different. It feels like I began with an image of an ideal narrative. And I looked for that narrative in various spots. And one of the places I found it was the movies. Another place I found it was in books. Maybe I even found it in music. Maybe, you know, I'm always looking for something that's short, ironic, vigorous, and percussive. I like musicals, not for the books or the patter, but because the numbers are usually so percussive. It has to be about art. I love the battle art of the 19th century. You know, the Charge of the Light Brigade by Lady, I don't know what her name was, Woodham Carruthers or something like that. That, and you asked me, what is the perfect, you didn't, but let's pretend like you asked me, what is the perfect image of a narrative for you, the way it should work? And my answer would be the barn raising dance in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. That there's something about that. It's about 7 minutes long. It was choreographed by Michael Kidd. It's about the brothers come to town, and there's all the pretty girls there, but the town boys have sort of got them, and they have this dance battle, and the brothers end up convincing the girls that they're the men they should be with. And it was, as I say, choreographed by Michael Kidd. And it's just, whenever I'm depressed, I'll look at it on YouTube. That's just 7 minutes of pure joy to me. And that, I'd like to write a book like that, except with gunfights. You know, it would be just like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, barn dance, except there'd be a lot of gunfights. That would be my idea of perfection. That's what I've been trying to do all these years.
Wow, that is fabulous. I think that's the perfect note for us to wrap up our conversation on, that joyous and bloody scene that Stephen has just laid out. I'm definitely going to YouTube that little clip right now. I believe I remember them dancing up onto the tabletops and stuff
Yes,
for that
exactly.
scene. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Wonderful. And now I'm going to imagine them with guns. Thank you both so much. This was fabulous. Just so interesting.
Let me thank Doug. He was great. He helped me. This is the best I can ever be, and he helped me get there, and I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's really was a wonderful conversation for me too. I really enjoyed it. And certainly want to thank Book Passage and Louisa for this evening.
It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you both so much. If you're interested in purchasing Basil's War, there is a link to it in the chat. And I want to thank, of course, Douglas, Stephen for being here, taking the time, all of you for watching, and also behind the scenes, our fabulous producer, Zach, who makes us look like we know what we're doing here. So really appreciate him there running everything for us. Thank you all so much, and looking forward to the next time you join us for one of these great events.
Thank you.
Thank you.